Henry VIII is one of the most infamous kings in English history. His reign was filled with scandal, drama, and plenty of bizarre stories that are hard to believe. You might know him as the king who had 6 wives, but there's a lot more to his life, and it's even crazier than you'd think. One of the most significant reasons behind Henry's wild life was his obsession with having a male heir. He was desperate for a son to secure the Tudor dynasty, but his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, only gave birth to one surviving child, a daughter, Mary. After 20 years of marriage, Henry became convinced that he needed a new wife to get his much desired son. This obsession sparked his historic break from the Catholic Church, leading to the formation of the Church of England. All of this just to get a divorce. And still, despite 6 wives, he only ended up with one sickly male heir, Edward VI. Henry's 6 wives are perhaps his most famous legacy, each with their own story. In order: Catherine of Aragon, divorced; Anne Boleyn, beheaded; Jane Seymour, died after childbirth; Anne of Cleves, divorced; Catherine Howard, beheaded; and Catherine Parr survived him. The phrase divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived is a simple way to remember their fates, but it doesn't capture all the drama. Anne Boleyn, Henry's second wife, was accused of witchcraft, incest, and adultery, charges likely trumped up by Henry and his court to get rid of her. Catherine Howard, his fifth wife, was just a teenager when she married Henry, who was 30 years older and already obese. She, too, was beheaded for alleged infidelity. Henry's desire to divorce Catherine of Aragon wasn't just a personal issue, it became a political and religious one. When the Pope refused to annul his marriage, Henry took matters into his own hands. In 1534, he declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England, effectively separating from the Catholic Church. This move allowed him to marry Anne Boleyn, but also led to widespread religious upheaval in England, including the dissolution of the monasteries, where Henry seized church lands and wealth to strengthen his hold on the kingdom. Henry VIII's love for food is legendary. He held massive feasts at court that often included up to 13 dishes per meal, with favorites like roasted swan, peacock, and venison. Henry also had a sweet tooth. He indulged in sugary treats like marzipan, candied fruits, and puddings. Over time, all of this eating and drinking caught up with him. He became severely obese, eventually weighing around 400 pounds. His girth became so large that he had to be moved around the palace with mechanical devices, and his leg ulcers were so severe that they emitted a foul odor. In his younger years, Henry was a talented athlete, known for his skill in archery, wrestling, hunting, and most famously, jousting. However, an accident during a jousting tournament in 1536 changed his life. He was thrown from his horse and crushed under the animal's weight. This accident left him with a severely injured leg that would trouble him for the rest of his life. The constant pain and infection in his legs contributed to his temper, his obesity, and ultimately his decline in health. As he aged, Henry became increasingly paranoid. Anyone he suspected of plotting against him, or simply falling out of favor, could be executed on a whim. His closest advisors, noblemen, and even friends weren't safe. He ordered the executions of 2 of his wives, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, as well as several members of his court, often based on flimsy evidence or personal vendettas. Henry also enacted the Treason Act, which made speaking out against him punishable by death, giving him unchecked power over life and death. Not everyone was happy with Henry's religious reforms. In 1536, a massive uprising called the Pilgrimage of Grace erupted in northern England. The protesters demanded the restoration of the Catholic Church and the monasteries Henry had dissolved. Henry pretended to negotiate, but once the uprising was quelled, he ordered the execution of its leaders and many participants. Hundreds were hanged, and the rebellion was crushed, cementing Henry's power. Anne of Cleves was Henry's 4th wife, chosen through a portrait that Henry found attractive. However, when he met her in person, he famously declared she looked like a Flanders mare and was not pleased with her appearance. They were married for just 6 months before Henry divorced her. Surprisingly, Anne fared better than most of his wives. She accepted the divorce gracefully, was given a generous settlement, and lived the rest of her life comfortably in England, earning the title of King's beloved sister. Henry finally got his male heir with his 3rd wife, Jane Seymour, who tragically died shortly after childbirth. Their son, Edward VI, ascended to the throne at age 9 but was sickly and reigned for only 6 years before dying of tuberculosis at just 15. Henry's desperate desire for a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty ultimately failed, as the crown eventually passed to his daughters, Mary the and Elizabeth I. When Henry VIII died in 1547, he was buried next to Jane Seymour, his true love. But here's the kicker: Henry's tomb was supposed to be a grand structure, yet it was never completed. To this day, he rests in a simple vault under St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Even in death, his legacy remains complicated, filled with the irony of a king who sought glory, but left behind tales of gluttony, tyranny, and scandal. From his 6 wives to his enormous feasts, from his brutal reign to his bizarre moments, the life of Henry VIII was truly a roller coaster of power, love, betrayal, and madness. No wonder he remains one of the most intriguing figures in history.